In the Congress, it was decided that America should declare its independence from Britain and outline the reasons why. In reality, the idea of sending to George III a formal written declaration of independence was not viewed as anything particularly important. Perhaps we were just going to throw the Brits out and establish a new country. Still, the writing of such a declaration was assigned to a committee, but the primary work was primarily done by a young man from Virginia named Thomas Jefferson. All Americans have heard of the Declaration of Independence, and most have seen photographs of the original handwritten document with the signatures below. But not many have ever actually read it, and if they did read it, did many understand it? My guess, not completely, and for two reasons. First, some words, phrases, and writing styles used in 1776 are not much used today. But more important, many of the abuses of George III in Parliament are listed with slightly vague descriptions. They refer to a type of abuse, but don't outline the specific incident that took place. To make things more clear, we have, in effect, translated parts of it into more modern, common English. And note that virtually all of the British actions that led to the Revolution occurred only during the 20 years before the Declaration. And the real clinchers came during the previous 5 years, especially the Intolerable Acts. During the earlier 125 years of British rule, there hadn't been all that many problems. Depending on how you count, the Declaration includes about 25 complaints, but some of them seem redundant or repetitious. We won't cover all of them, but the first batch focuses on the king replacing representative government with a tyrannical authority. Among them were rejecting legislation proposed by the colonies, but more drastic was him dissolving colonial bodies of representation, certainly referring to the elimination of the Massachusetts legislature. There was the matter of the courts, the king interfering with the objective judicial process, more specifically, as noted earlier, making judges dependent upon him for their jobs and salaries. In other words, judges were appointed by the king in London. The king is a tyrant because he keeps standing armies in the colonies under his direct command during times of peace, and he makes the military power superior to the civil government. This refers to many incidents, but most notably the military occupation of Boston. And he forces the colonists to support the military presence through increased taxes. Remember the Stamp Act, the Townshend Act, and others? It was all about money. The next batch is aimed at the British Parliament. Subjecting colonists to legislation without our consent or even considering our input. This is the without representation part of the taxation without representation slogan. And recall the British answer that you have virtual representation because we care about you. Requiring us colonists to house and feed British troops in our homes. This, of course, refers to the Quartering Act. The king shut off our trade with other parts of the world. The best example here is the closing of the port of Boston. Imposing taxes that don't benefit us. The revenues from duties and taxes on tea were shipped back to England. Taking away the trial by jury. Among other things, this relates to the king and the Parliament's idea that jurors be selected by the whim of the sheriff, and basically forbidding further legislation by colonial governments. In short, that was a matter of taking away citizen representation and putting all power in the hands of the crown. He sent the British military to attack colonists, the 700 soldiers sent to Lexington and Concord. And the final one we'll mention is that George III's Navy had a practice of kidnapping American sailors and forcing them into British military service. All we can say is, that's true.